Hello, my name's John. This is how I apply transfers to miniatures, and you're watching Wargames, Models and Other Hobbies. Hello and welcome. In this video I'm going to be running through the process of applying transfers to miniatures. In this case it's two transfers, one on top of each other, to finally get to this stage. Get it in focus. There we go. This stage of the shoulder pad with a battle line marking and a squad number. I have each of the different stages that I go through just here. First thing to do is you get your transfers and cut them out, which I've already done. We've got that just here on this little acrylic disc. Let's just move those ones out of the way first. So what I want to do is apply the transfer to this shoulder pad. So the first things first, what I want to do is get the transfer soaking. I tend to prefer putting it on a piece of acrylic like this, or a dish, and rather than there being water already in it, just to reduce the risk of any spillage or anything, I put water on it like that. So it's now starting to soak off the paper. The next thing that I use is a clear matte varnish. Let me just give that a shake. Really important with the clear matte varnish to make sure you shake it up. The one I'm currently using is a Humbrol clear matte varnish. And the first thing that I want to do with this is I just want to put a small bit of varnish where I'm going to be applying this transfer. Now that went on a little bit too much, so I'm just going to knock that back slightly. So I do this at a variety of different stages, whether it's during the painting process because I want to paint over the transfer, or it's at the end of the process. It doesn't really matter, the same principle applies. So that matte varnish has gone on, and by now you'll see that that transfer is moving off the paper. So I'm going to just move it off with my brush, there we go, and then apply it to my brush like this. And while this matte varnish is still wet, I'm going to apply this transfer. Now take as long as you need to position this. So now that's roughly in place, what I want to do, just drying my brush on this paper a little bit, and I'm pulling some of the moisture away, as well as any residual varnish around the edge of that transfer. So you can see now it's on there. It's still quite shiny because that varnish is drying. But what I do at this stage as well is I get a little bit more varnish onto my brush and I paint that over the top of the transfer. And then I'll set this aside to dry. So at this point I've got my next miniature. While it is drying, I can apply the next transfer to it, but I also want to apply the transfer to one which is already dried. So still got some varnish on this brush, just going to paint that where I'm going to apply this. So we have our two miniatures just there. Just going to clean that brush, and while I'm here I'm just going to put the lid back on the varnish. So I need two numbers for these, so from my section there I'm going to get some number 4s. So I'll try and do it on camera so you can see. So I'm just cutting those out from this, and all I'm going to do is lay it on where I put some of that water previously, and then getting my brush, just going to drip some more water on there. Now what you will find with the newer transfers, this is a lot easier. Whereas with the old ones you do have to let them soak a lot longer, especially if they are quite old and you need to kind of revive them slightly. This is why I also use the clear varnish. You're not just relying on the stickiness of the transfer, you've got another surface that helps stick the transfer down. So that first number 4, there we go, that is coming off. So here we have our number 4 on the brush, and I'm going to go to the one that was already dry, which I put a little bit of varnish on, and I'm just going to gently stick that in place. A little bit of finessing so I get it in exactly the right place, and there we go. So now I'm going to do it to the one that is not quite dry, so the previous transfer is still movable, just so you can see that you can just stick them straight on top of each other. Now I've got to take my time when I do this, because I'm adding more moisture again to the process. You can see I've moved the first one, so it is a case of gently moving them both, and it is a little bit tricky. So my general advice whenever applying transfers is take your time, let the first layer stick in place before you start moving and applying the other ones. But if you are a bit impatient, you can do it. Needs to just nudge that up slightly. There we go. Just get that into focus. Apologies if that wasn't in focus. So I can apply that next layer while I'm waiting for the first one to dry, but it can be a little bit tricky. This one that I applied, it went on nice and smoothly. What I will do with those now is I will wait for those to dry thoroughly before I apply another coat of clear varnish onto them. What I have here is one that has completely dried, and here is the one which has been slightly weathered as well. And the way I go about weathering it and dulling down the colour is I use washes or inks, and also I might use another colour that I dot in places to look like the transfer has been scraped away and so on. In this case I'm just going to use the Nuln Oil just to brush over the top of it. This takes away some of the shininess. If you want them to stay bright and shiny and with no wear, don't worry about this stage, it's fine, you can leave it. But I'm just going to gently run over it with a small amount of Nuln Oil just to knock it back slightly. If I use too much while it's still wet, I can use water to kind of clean it up. But all I want to do is run this over the top of the whole thing. There's a little bit too much on there. So I'm just going to clean my brush and draw some of that out from the edges. Just with that brush. There we go. And now I'm going to let that dry. And as I let that dry, the shininess of the transfer will get knocked back, and I'll be left with something like this that we can see on this final miniature. And that's it. That's how I start to apply transfers to my models. If you want a more in-depth video of the process and using transfers in other ways, please drop a like and a comment. But for now, I hope you've enjoyed the video. My name's John, and you've been watching Wargames, Models, and Other Hobbies.